Hi, guys. I am Sunny Chayes, and I am so excited to be with you today, as I always am. I'm always very excited to bring the guests who I have the fortune, the great fortune, to gather in my world to bring. And I have no exception today whatsoever. Today, we're going to be talking about really soulful concepts. A beautiful book I have read called Gods of Our Times. And we're going to be talking with the author of this book. And the reason I love it so much, I read all the time, and I'm just constantly immersed in all the literature that you guys write out there. You do the heavy lifting, and I get to do the fun part, the reading. This book really brings the concepts of what do we do when we are dealing with something that is so painful. It might be war, it might be death, it might be our own health, it might be loss of one of our senses, it might be a love lost. And this book also talks about, really beautifully, sort of the class system in 1925 Paris, which feels as relevant today as it was then. It's kind of fun to read about it with a little glit and glamour going on with it, as well as some grit, actually. This book also really talks about life philosophy, I feel, and reading it, I felt like I was doing a deep dive in seeking my true soul. And so with all of that and many, many more things, we're going to have a great conversation with Michael. Come on in. Thank you, Tony, for bringing him into us. Hello, Mr. Bowker. You are on the show with me today, and I'm so glad we're finally doing this. Yay.
Me too. Me too. And thank you very much. This is a lot of fun.
I'm so glad. Oops. Did we lose? Oh, hello.
I'm back.
So very good. So I, again, have a tendency of really going deep anytime I read anything. But I think that one of the things that I want to kind of bring forward is, and I think this is kind of interesting because not very many people are writers out there in the world, but we are fascinated with the writing process. The angst that people go through. I just saw an incredible opera about Virginia Woolf, The Hours, and her angst of writing. Hemingway, who actually plays a part in this book, the process of that first line, what in the world? And we all get to read it, watch it in a movie, in a play, in a TV show, however, a song we get to listen to. And yet it is a really, really deep, soulful, philosophical, and kind of transcendent process to be a writer. And I feel like you, as a writer, choose to have the character of Jake as this writer who has all of everything I just said and more going on with him as the hub of the wheel of this book. And so I just want to congratulate you for writing such a beautiful, beautiful many, many stories in one story, a weaving together of so many beautiful characters and really bringing up some very important and very, very significant and relevant questions and answers. More questions than answers, I'd say. So go on in, Michael. Join me.
Oh, Sunny, thank you very much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. When you write a book like this, you kind of get lost as you're writing it. That's how Paris is actually a major character in this book.
Yes.
And I thought, if I'm going to write a book and I'm going to be in my head and trying to find these characters and they're going to come out and play, where do I want to be every day? And I thought, Paris is not a bad choice.
And in 1925 to boot,
1925, yes. I love the time period. I love the music. I love the art. But the human challenges could be any time. They're an evergreen challenge that we seem to face over and over again. And each person, as you and I have talked about, each person has a choice and multiple choices in their lives. And those choices ultimately define who you are.
And they're stepping stones. I like to use the expression of spiritual breadcrumbs. I say that a lot because I feel like that's sort of, if we tell the truth of it, we are mortals. We're moving along, and we just sort of try to follow those spiritual breadcrumbs to something. To something that makes sense, and perhaps where we are in the moment makes sense. And again, we as mortals and also spiritual seekers, many of my audience are, I would classify as that, are always looking for something deeper in ourselves. We sort of don't settle. It's always what can be deeper, what can be higher, how can I love more? How can I give more? How can I be more in this life? How can I make it make sense? How can I make it make more sense in this crazy world we're living in? How do we do that? And I feel that when I read Jake, who I love, he's, as I say, our hub of the wheel, in a fedora occasionally, he is really he sort of takes us by the hand and really allows for a lot of humility, a lot of self-reflection, a lot of really truth-telling, and observation around him, noticing what sort of works, what doesn't, how, again, in the Parisian world at that time, sort of the class system, the glittery of the glitziest of the top to the people who might be considered refugees, or the people who literally live in the lower parts of Paris, in the grittier parts of Paris, and the importance of all of them in some way or another. So I really love that. You do it very light-handed, actually, but I dig it.
Well, I appreciate that. It was fun, and it does have to do with all the stratas of life. And Jake is a fairly naive journalist from the Midwest who gets sent to Paris to interview who he thinks are going to be the gods of his times. He's looking for perfection. And Hemingway is there, and Picasso, and Gertrude Stein, and F. Scott Fitzgerald. And he does have encounters with them and finds out that perhaps they aren't the gods that he thought they might be. They are fabulous artists, but and then he has encounters with the other end of the spectrum, which are the thieves that live underground and run the underbelly of Paris, so to speak. And he finds things there that he didn't expect. So it's a true revelation for him, but it's also a challenge that may cost him his life. And Sophie, at the same time, has very similar, not similar challenges, but challenges that are just as potentially devastating. And they happen to meet under the most unlikely of circumstances.
Well, and absolutely. And one thing that I want to interject there, again, I love the idea of him meeting him, and again, just like many of us, and you've been a journalist for many years, and so you know what it might be like to meet different people who from the TV viewpoint or from afar seem like gods, and then we meet them. I've had that experience in Hollywood where I've met my gods and they didn't measure up, and others very much measured up and then some. I love that, so that he kind of questions that about, and even the question of, can you be a great artist and a great man? Do you have to be a great man? And I'm saying man, human, woman, person, sentient being, to be a great artist? Do they have to go hand in hand? That's a great question that you ask, and you don't necessarily, you leave it for us to kind of ponder in our own lives. And that also allows us to kind of dig in with ourselves about our perfection thing. Can we be a beautiful person? Can we be a worthy person? What we do, is it enough? Does it have to be perfect? Can it just be what we could pull out that day, and just if it's baking cookies or just doing the littlest thing, getting laundry done or finishing a bit of work or having a beautiful conversation with someone, is that enough? Do we have to build a building or, whatever? And so I think it's a great question that you ask, and of very, very many.
Yes.
By the way, I don't know what you're drinking, but I am having my martini in honor of gods of our time. So I just want to say. And
That's
guys,
fantastic. I love that.
And I have the cover behind me, so I just thought I'd just kind of go for it here. Why not?
By the way, that cover was painted by one of the top artists in Europe. I asked her to do that for me. The only thing I asked, she created this after reading the book, and she told me, she goes, I just finished your book. I miss it already.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Isn't that nice?
That's beautiful. I feel like that sometimes when I read books. I don't want to read the last 10 pages because I don't want it to end. And I felt sort of that way with this book. And I also wanted to know, sort of how it would all come together. But yes, don't you have the question that weaves in and out the concept of perfection. And because you have the artist, you have the struggling, very humble and again, angst sort of, I wouldn't say angst driven, but just angst writer. He just has angst. And he's judgmental of himself and that kind of thing. That really is something that, again, I know we as humans in certain levels of my audience, I know, really deal with that perfectionism concept.
I think everybody does sooner or later. You decide you're not quite enough for whatever reason, and then that needs to be measured out. So both of them, for completely different reasons, had to deal with singular issues and decide, can we trust ourselves and the world enough to love again?
Yes.
And Sophie really she's tough. She's tough, but she has major issues which were not her fault. I mean, she had to survive World War One, and the terrible things that happened then. And then her question is, can I trust the world enough to love? Because I've already had everyone that I love taken away from me. Mm-hmm. Now what?
Yeah.
And
now
so
what?
Real question, I think the primary theme of the book is, can two people come together and actually help each other grow to a point where they can trust to love again? It's not always an answer that is yes. That's a tough. I think a lot of us go through that in one way or another.
Yes.
But it was so much fun to set it in Paris and to set it in a world of art and music, and then the underground world of the. So it was fun.
That contrast,
such a joy to write this book.
Yes, the contrast of, again, the glittery chandeliers and the glittery champagne and martinis, all the way to, really, really, really survival. What you were talking about, being able to trust and love with Sophie and Jake, I will even say one sentence or two about that, and then I'm going to say something about Sophie and Cassie. With Sophie and Jake, you were bringing the concept of, can two people come together? And what I feel about that is that I got from the book, I don't know if it's deeper or a little different or whatever, but can people, we move through life alone. We're born alone, we die alone, that sort of thing. And then we want to find love, whether that means with ourselves, with someone else, however that works. That is a natural urge and desire we have. And is it, again, a person, and we come together in a certain circumstance that allows us to a little bit let go enough that we can kind of let the gift of the other person in enough, and then us giving them the gift enough that we can sort of move to another plateau of letting go, letting in, and then like that. So that's what I feel, because it's so delicate with Sophie and Jake. So that's sort of, and I think that's a really organic and I was going to say awesome, that word came to me, process that we can allow ourselves to go through. And it really does start with us trusting ourselves. And I think that's a big theme in this book too, is everybody seems to have issues with trusting themselves. So there you go. That's what I gleaned from many of them.
Well, there were challenges that I gave myself in this book. One of them was, and what would happen if I was a young journalist and I had to interview Ernest Hemingway? And I actually pulled that off, and I think it's one of the more accurate portrayals of what would happen in that situation.
I agree.
And the other one was, as on completely the other side of the rainbow, is what would it be to make love to someone if you couldn't see?
Yeah.
What would the challenges be? Because we're so visual. Where would all the things that you would experience, through what senses would that come? And
Yep.
to me, that was a wonderful challenge to just get as far into that as I could. So anyway, there were a lot of things that I rolled out that I said, okay, let's go into this place, because I've been into this place before. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and I also love the concept of, earlier we were talking about, can we be a god? I mean, the name of the book is Gods of Our Times. So the concept of, again, we're talking earlier about the perfection, but it's also the striving to be perfect. It's also what we look at. It's also, again, the gods of any time. You know, in this modern day, we have certain gods. They may be political, obviously music and movie and things like that. We also do have, not as much, we don't pay as much attention, unfortunately, to the artists and the classical musicians that we would have years ago, like a Mozart. The point is again, can someone be a master? Let's use that term. A master of their craft, a master of their world, of their offering. Let's say they're, Deepak Chopra, or they're those kind of people who are very well known, and maybe be a jerk, maybe not be an amazing person. So is that possible? And I love that you play around with that. Again, you just kind of throw it at us to kind of play with, which I think is really groovy. And the other thing that I like that you do is the concept of us as there's sort of the spiritual, the religious, the devil and the angel, the demon and the goddess, the good and the bad, the dark and the light, the high and the low, all of these concepts that we have in religion and spirituality, sacredness, philosophy, all those things. What is that all about? And you have an example in the book which I just really love, and I won't give too much away, but two people have a very, very similar experience in life during the war. The war affected them very similarly, and they're both women. And then how one of them takes the experience, and yes, she's brokenhearted and ripped apart in her soul, all of that. She doesn't do what we call in the spiritual world spiritual bypass. She goes through it, and she finds herself a healer. She finds herself going in. She kind of goes right in, like the bird into the fire kind of thing. And then another one who had the same experience and was friendly with her in the same village takes a very different direction in her way of dealing with it in her life. And so I think it's really great because it's sort of that split of our psyches, and it's like put those two together, and we have all of that, and all of that is true, I believe, and then it's just, again, what do we choose? What do we choose? I shall have another sip of martini while you answer me.
Well, I would just like to let people know that the only thing I can guarantee is that I don't think the book is boring. I've written enough that it's fairly quick, and it goes from point A to point B. I mean, it goes quickly. We're talking about some pretty serious subjects and in-depth subjects, but the book does not plod through it. It races through pretty quickly, and a lot of things happen. Um,
Well,
and
you're
as
a
I
really good
say,
writer, Michael. You tell